Brian Harkness was always known for his tough attitude. Growing up in a rough Chicago neighborhood, he gained a reputation for his quick temper and ability to stand his ground long before joining the Marines. He spent many afternoons proving himself, earning respect and fear from those around him. His teachers called him untamable, and even his father, Bob, an ex-Marine officer who'd served in Korea, wondered if Brian would wind up in prison before he could find any semblance of discipline. And yet, Brian surprised them all by channeling that rage and signing up for the Marine Corps Reserve the moment he turned 18. The discipline steadied him, gave him purpose, and for the first time he felt his anger transform into something lethal, but controlled. Then came Sandra. Brian met Sandra in high school and his parents approved. She was smart, ambitious, and poised to become a paralegal. She exuded confidence, always excelling in academics. 3 years after graduation, they married. Sandra became a paralegal, pushing Brian to take extra shifts at a mechanic's shop to maintain their lifestyle. With her legal career and his Marine Reserve pay, they built a stable life, but tension simmered beneath the surface. She insisted Brian do better than the Marine Reserves. She boasted at her law firm that she was going to marry up in the world, that her brawny Marine was going to make them rich or at least comfortable. Her remarks about real men stung, making Brian feel small. Yet when he confronted her, she'd soothe him with sweet words and seductive charm, keeping him hooked. Everything shattered in March 1967 when Brian volunteered for Vietnam. His father, a veteran, understood. Sandra raged, furious at his decision. That night, she let him have it. "You're going to leave me here, in this dull neighborhood, while you run off to show off in Indochina?" she spat, voice dripping with disdain. "Do you have any idea what that'll do to our finances if you come home in a box or in pieces?" They were in their small living room when she said it. Brian stared at her from the worn-out sofa, his arms folded. He was bigger than ever now, muscular from relentless physical training, and yet she was the one who towered over him in that moment. "I made a commitment," he growled. "A commitment to the Marine Corps. I can't just stand by. It's my duty." Sandra's lips curled into a sneer. "Duty to whom? To yourself? To your father's precious Marine legacy? You didn't think about me, you never do. Well, fine, go get shot up if that's what you want. Just don't expect me to put my life on hold for you," he bristled. "Sandra, you don't get to talk to me like that. I've never once cheated, never once complained about the hours I put in to pay for this house. Don't you dare say I'm not thinking about us." She stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Oh, is that so? Then why hasn't our life improved in 3 years, Brian? We barely got that tiny house, and your pay as a reservist plus the shop job isn't exactly piling up wealth. I'm the one who keeps this house afloat. Me, with my paralegal job, my negotiating skills, my unstoppable drive." Brian glared at her. "So, it's all about money now, is it?" She laughed, cold as ice. "It's about progress. I refuse to end up a poor nobody riding your coattails to nowhere." Brian, heart-hammering, told her the date he'd leave. She wept that night, yes. But the next morning, her tears turned to frosty arrogance again. As he packed his duffel bag, she snapped, "You'd better not come back in a wheelchair. I have no interest in pushing a cripple around." His anger flared. "Sandra, have some humanity." "Humanity? Look who's lecturing me about humanity," she scoffed. "Going off to a war half the country hates. Don't be surprised if I find someone new while you're over there playing hero." He nearly roared in fury, but bit his tongue. They parted on a sour note, though the night before he left, she grabbed his Johnson. "This is mine," she said venomously. "Don't you dare let some Vietnamese woman near it. No one but you," he promised, though the bitterness in his voice was clear. The tension between them soared. Their final intimacy was more like a battle than an act of love. Shortly before he shipped out, Brian updated his will, unsettled by the thought that Sandra might get everything if he died, yet not wanting to leave her destitute either. He arranged an allotment for the mortgage and utilities, ensuring she wouldn't have an excuse to whine about bills while he was gone. Then he left for Vietnam, bearing a new tattoo across his chest. Death before dishonor. Vietnam was worse than Brian imagined. Blistering heat, relentless mosquitoes, and the stench of fear mixed with gunpowder. As a mechanic and fire team leader, he faced constant tests. At first, active duty Marines dismissed him as a reservist, but his fierce determination in combat earned their respect. They called him Pitbull for his clenched jaw intensity in battle. While others sought escape in bars and brothels, Brian remained loyal to Sandra, despite her sharp tongue. His buddies teased him, especially Harker, who joked, "Bet someone's sleeping with your wife back home." The thought haunted him. He wrote to Sandra faithfully, but her replies dwindled from bi-weekly to every 6 weeks. His parents sent more letters than she did. The photos she sent, her in a tight swimsuit at the beach, made him wonder who was behind the camera. Doubt gnawed at him. Christmas passed with no card from Sandra, only a note from his parents. He shoved the bitterness down. Focus or you die. Then came January 1968 near Da Nang. Rumors of a Tet Lunar New Year assault proved true. The Viet Cong swarmed and the ground trembled from the dead. Brian's squad was pinned. Harker and 3 others fell in the first wave. Screaming, Brian fired back. A bullet tore through his leg. Another gashed his cheek to the bone. Shrapnel nearly severed his ear. Yet he refused to fall, rallying his team until reinforcements arrived. Just in time to hold the line. When medevac choppers finally touched down, Brian was nearly delirious with pain and blood loss. While being lifted away, he stared at the bodies of Harker and the others. Their sight tormented him as the chopper soared. He wondered if it wouldn't have been better to die there than face the unknown at home. He woke in a military hospital in San Francisco. Doctors told him they'd saved his leg, though it'd never be the same. A bandage covered his ear, leaving a twisted stub. The bullet that grazed his cheek required extensive stitches. He was stable, they said, but would face months of therapy. He wasn't alone for long. His parents appeared, tears in their eyes, but Sandra was conspicuously absent. Bob, his father, tried to lighten the mood. "Damn, son," he said with a forced grin. "I thought I taught you to duck." Brian managed a lopsided smile. "Guess I forgot." His mother patted his arm. "We're so proud, Brian. We're sorry you got hurt, but we're grateful you're alive." Brian's gaze flicked to the hallway, expecting Sandra any moment. She didn't come. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice harder than he intended. His parents exchanged dark looks. Bob exhaled slowly. "Brian, we don't know. She hasn't been around. She hasn't answered phone calls, and we only saw her once a couple of months ago, saying goodbye to some guy in a Corvette." Brian felt a chill. "A blue Corvette?" Bob nodded. "Yes, junior partner from her firm, I believe. I saw Sandra at the door in a bathrobe. She waved to him and didn't say much to me. Since then, I've been checking on the house. It's a mess. Notices about unpaid bills, rotting food, mold, the works." Brian's face, half-bandaged, burned with anger. "Son of a—" "Careful," his mother cut in. "You need your strength to recover." But Bob pressed on. "We also found out she's draining your accounts. The bank statements show large withdrawals, cash. I covered some utilities so they wouldn't shut off the power." "I'm sorry, son." Brian closed his eyes, rage coiling inside. He remembered Harker's warnings. "Jody's probably at your house right now." Harker had joked. But it wasn't a joke. A storm brewed in Brian's mind, threatening to swallow him. He wasted no time contacting a Navy legal officer. Papers for power of attorney were drawn up, giving Bob and Brian's mother the ability to freeze the accounts, remove Sandra's name, and salvage what they could. His father offered to hire a private investigator, George Williams, a retired policeman. Brian agreed. "Do it," he said. "I want the truth. All of it." The next day, Bob called with grim news. "Sandra's been taking nearly all your pay. She's living God knows where with that swagman fellow." Brian hissed. "Swagman?" "Yeah, that's the bastard's name." "She also left the house in shambles," Bob continued. "The bed's stained and disgusting. I think she's using it with him." "Burn it," Brian said coldly. "Burn every sheet. I don't want a trace of her filth on anything I own." His mother tried to comfort him. "We'll fix this, Brian." But all he could see was red. The only thing that kept him steady was the memory of his fallen comrades, whose ghosts visited him nightly in feverish dreams, accusing him of surviving while they perished. 2 weeks passed. The hospital pinned a Purple Heart on Brian, and a Marine officer nominated him for a Silver Star for his valor near Da Nang. But pride eluded him. His mind was consumed with Sandra's betrayal. Nightmares haunted his sleep. Cleared for discharge, doctors warned it could take a year before he walked normally. They gave him a cane and sent him off with forced well wishes. Lieutenant Colonel Arvin Johnson held a brief ceremony, pinning the Silver Star to Brian's uniform, calling him uncompromisingly brave. His parents wept with pride. Brian felt nothing. He was returning to a wrecked life. At the airport, protesters jeered, but his parents ignored them. Back home, Brian limped into a house reeking of garbage. A year ago, it had symbolized a future with Sandra. Now, it was a tomb of broken promises. His mother had tried to clean, but the damage was done. Trash everywhere. Dishes rotting, stale perfume mixing with decay. Sandra had taken most of her belongings, leaving only a few forgotten dresses. The wedding album lay on the table, photos ripped out. In the bathroom trash, he found their wedding rings. Rage surged, blinding him. He wanted to destroy something, anything. Instead, he forced himself to breathe. Then his eyes landed on his Bowie knife from Vietnam. Its scabbard marked, "Marche ou crève," march or die. It had never left his duffel, as if it belonged to him. That night, he slept in the guest room, having tossed the tainted mattress. By morning, he called George, his father's friend, and a lawyer, Mike McGregor. It was time to end this. They arrived to find Brian pacing with a cane, knuckles white on the handle. George placed a reel-to-reel tape recorder on the table. "I've been following Sandra and that slime Eric Swagman for weeks," he said. "Wait until you hear this." When the tape started, background noise from a steakhouse hummed beneath the conversation. "So Sandra, have you thought about my proposal?" came Swagman's smug voice. "I'm not sure I can do that to Brian," Sandra replied, a hint of hesitation. "Yes, I cheated and now I'm pregnant, but telling Brian to raise it while I still sleep with you? That's too much." "Don't be naive," Swagman sneered. "He's a gullible idiot who worships you. We can threaten him with divorce, alimony, child support. He's just a Marine grunt. No big deal. Besides, if he won't sign on, we can fix it another way." "What do you mean?" Sandra asked. "Houses catch fire," Swagman said softly. "Brakes fail. People get mugged. Could be an accident, you know." Sandra's voice quivered. "You'd end him?" "Keep your voice down, babe," he growled. "Only if he won't cooperate. The man's an idiot for going to Vietnam in the first place. He'll likely roll over if we push right. Don't forget, you drained his accounts. He's broke. He'll do anything to get you back." Sandra sighed. I mean, he's never been rich, and it's time I had a partner who can give me a better life." Brian's hands shook. The tape ended. Lawyer Mike McGregor sat back in his chair. "That's conspiracy. Possibly attempted murder, theft, you name it," he said. Brian's face hardened. "She wants me to raise their bastard child while she sleeps with him in my bed?" "It gets worse," George said, rewinding the tape, playing another snippet. "What kind of man leaves his wife for a war?" Eric chuckled. Sandra laughed, a harsh sound. "A fool. If he'd stayed, maybe I'd have stayed loyal." "But this is so much more interesting, Eric. Brian's too old-fashioned, too poor. With your drive, we can make serious money." "Damn straight," Eric said. "Anyway, if he gets in our way, we'll take him out. The firm will cover us. They love me. And with your legal knowledge, we can handle any accidents." George clicked off the recorder, cold fury in his eyes. They think no one can touch them. Brian clenched his jaw so hard his cheek pounded. He forced himself to speak. "Mike, I want everything I can get in the divorce. The house is mine. She's not seeing a cent." Mike nodded. "Already filed. We're also suing Swagman for alienation of affection, and the DA might pursue criminal charges. As for Sandra, we're hitting her with adultery and abandonment. Plus, we're freezing your accounts and removing her name. She can't touch your money again." George took a breath. "Brian, watch your back. They mentioned tampering with your brakes or burning the house. I've got friends in the police who'll keep an eye out, but still, keep your doors locked. Watch your six." Brian stared at the Bowie knife on the table. "Believe me, I'm not letting them take me by surprise." Later that day, Brian's phone rang. Sandra's voice clawed at him through the receiver. "Brian, you're back?" "Yes," he growled. "Surprise." She tried to adopt a tender tone. "I was waiting for you to call. I wanted to explain." "Cut the crap," he snapped. "I know about Swagman, the pregnancy, the money you stole. I know you plan to blackmail me into raising his kid." "I'm sorry," she whispered. Then her voice sharpened. "Wait, who told you that?" "I heard it from the horse's mouth. Or the donkey's in this case," he said icily. "I've got it on tape, Sandra. You and Eric discussing ending me." She drew in a sharp breath. You can't prove a thing in court. It was just talk. Look, let's be reasonable. We can work this out." "You think I'm going to work out sharing you with him?" Brian barked. "Are you insane?" "You used to love me," she purred. "And I loved you. But you went off to that stupid war. What was I supposed to do, wait like a lonely housewife? My life isn't a 1950s postcard, Brian. I have needs." He laughed bitterly, a sound tinged with real hatred. "Needs that include draining my accounts? Needs that include hooking up with a weasel who's plotting to kill me?" Her arrogance crackled through the phone. "Don't pretend you're innocent. You're a killer too, Brian. Don't Marines kill people? Don't try to play the saint." Brian's knuckles whitened around the receiver. "I fought for my country. You screwed me over for greed." She paused, then spat. "You're not man enough to understand. Eric is powerful, wealthy, something you'll never be. He's everything you failed to become." Before Brian could unleash a torrent of curses, Eric's voice interrupted, shouting, "Hang up on him, Sandra. He's worthless." Brian smiled grimly. "You both better lawyer up and watch your backs, because I'm coming for everything you have." Eric laughed. "You can try, soldier boy. I'll bury you alive. You hear me? You're finished." The line clicked. Brian stood there, breath ragged. Eventually, Amelia's presence in his life would shift everything, but at that moment, all he could see was revenge. That evening, Brian, seething, limped to his old pickup truck, ignoring the pain in his leg. He decided to drive to a bar called The Watering Hole, a place he used to frequent. Yet, the neighborhood had deteriorated. Dark alleys, suspicious silhouettes. Neon lights flickered ominously outside. He parked and made his way in. The stench of cigarette smoke, spilled beer, and stale sweat assaulted him. The old faces he once recognized were gone, replaced by rough sorts wearing gang colors. He sat at the bar, quietly sipping a beer. His anger hammered away inside his skull, but he tried to drown it with alcohol. Suddenly, he heard a muffled scream from outside. Heart pounding, he rushed into a side alley, cane forgotten. There, 5 or 6 men circled a young woman, some brandishing knives. She was pinned against a grimy wall, tears streaking her face. "Help!" she gasped. Brian's fury flared, combined with a shred of protective instinct left over from war. He drew the Bowie knife from under his jacket. "Let her go!" he roared. One of the men turned, eyes narrowed. "Back off, old soldier, or I'll cut you up!" Brian pressed forward, letting the soldier in him take control. The thug lunged. Brian dodged, slashed the man's wrist, sending the switchblade clattering. The others advanced, but a couple, seeing Brian's half-scarred face and savage eyes, backed away. 2 remained, brandishing weapons. Brian blocked a strike, slicing open a man's forearm. Another hammered him from behind with a piece of wood. Brian staggered but whirled, ramming his elbow into the attacker's gut. Police sirens wailed just as the men scattered. The woman collapsed, sobbing. Brian felt blood trickle down his face. His stitches reopened. Cops arrived in time to cuff a couple of the injured gang members. One officer recognized Brian. "For crying out loud, Harkness! Didn't George warn you about this area?" Brian shrugged, panting. "I've faced worse." The woman, trembling, thanked him repeatedly. "I'm Amelia. You saved my life." She looked at his wounds, eyes wide with concern. "You're bleeding." He shrugged again, trying to play it off. "I've had worse injuries." When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics patched Brian's reopened stitches. The police let him go with a warning to stay away from trouble. Amelia, still shaking, said she had nowhere to go. She'd been living in her car after fleeing an abusive boyfriend. "Come on," Brian said quietly. "I have a spare room, if you don't mind the mess." She stared at him, uncertain. I can't impose," he insisted. Something in her eyes, the innocence perhaps, cut through his rage. She was raw, alone, and looked at him the way no one had in a long time, with genuine gratitude, not calculation. He gave the cops his truck keys so they could drive it home, while Amelia led him to her battered old Dodge Dart. On the ride, she timidly asked, "Were you in Vietnam? I saw you on the news. You got a Silver Star." "Yeah," he muttered. "Don't remind me." He said nothing about Sandra. He was too raw, too ashamed. His mind buzzed with all he had lost. But he felt something stirring. Maybe saving Amelia was a sign he hadn't lost all sense of honor. Amelia quickly became part of Brian's life. She helped clean, cooked simple meals, and shared her past. Once a secretary, now left destitute by tragedy. Yet Brian saw no arrogance, no hidden motives. Within days, she was working on his truck with ease. Wiping grease from her cheek, she said, "We should replace these spark plugs." Unlike Sandra, who had mocked his trade, Amelia embraced it. Then came the call from Mike McGregor. His divorce hearing was set, and criminal charges loomed over Sandra and Swagman. "Wear your dress blues," Mike advised. "We want you to look like the Marine hero." Despite his anger, Brian wondered, had Sandra truly planned his murder? The evidence said yes, but he still recalled the girl he once loved. He cleaned his uniform, polished his medals. "You look incredible," Amelia whispered, touching his eagle globe and anchor. He forced a smile. "I'm still about to face my traitorous wife." She traced his scar. "She's the fool. Soon you'll be free." Brian pulled her close. "Thanks for being here." She met his gaze, eyes full of emotion. "You saved my life. I owe you everything." He rested his forehead against hers. "Just stay, that's all I want." At last, the court date arrived. Brian, rigid in his dress blues, arrived with Amelia by his side. He moved slowly, leaning on his cane, but the uniform gave him an imposing presence. 14 Marines from his reserve unit flanked him, including Lieutenant Colonel Johnson and Sergeant Major Roberts, to show support. Brian's parents stood behind him, brimming with stern pride. Across the aisle, Sandra strutted in wearing a tight-fitting dress that showed her pregnant belly, accompanied by Eric Swagman in an expensive suit. Sandra's eyes widened upon seeing Brian's battered face and half-missing ear in stark contrast to the polished uniform. She whispered something to Eric, who snickered. Brian settled into his seat beside Mike McGregor, who was busily organizing legal documents. The gavel banged, and the judge, a gray-haired man with sharp eyes, asked everyone to rise, then sit. The proceedings began. Mike systematically laid out the evidence: Sandra's abandonment, her draining of accounts, the taped confession of potential murder, Eric's role in corrupting the marriage. The judge's eyebrows rose repeatedly. When Sandra's turn came, she put on a performance. "Your Honor," she said, voice laced with faux remorse, "I never wanted to hurt Brian, but he left me in dire financial straits. My job alone couldn't cover everything. Eric merely helped me." Mike snorted loud enough for the judge to hear. The judge glowered at Sandra. "Mrs. Harkness." "Not for long," Mike interjected. We're seeking a swift divorce." Sandra shot him a venomous glare. "I was lonely, Your Honor. He left to fight a controversial war, and I felt abandoned. Eric offered comfort and security. This baby—" She put a protective hand on her belly. "I assumed it was Brian's at first. I only discovered later it was Eric's. I'm so sorry." Brian gritted his teeth, remembering the mocking tone of her phone call. Her apology now sounded staged. The judge asked about the taped conversation. Sandra's lawyer tried to object, but Mike insisted it was legal, as the recording took place in a public setting where privacy wasn't expected. The tape played in the courtroom. Gasps rippled through the audience as Eric's calm talk of accidents and Sandra's references to draining Brian's bank accounts filled the air. Sandra kept her eyes down, cheeks burning. Eric's face twisted with fury. "Your Honor, that was private talk," Eric snapped. The judge banged his gavel. "Quiet, Mr. Swagman. Considering the nature of these statements, I'm not inclined to be sympathetic." Eric rose, shouting, "This is all garbage! He's just a grunt who thinks he can walk in here with a uniform and—" "Sit down," the judge snarled. "You speak out of turn again. I'll hold you in contempt." When the judge delivered his verdict, it was devastatingly one-sided. He granted Brian an immediate divorce on grounds of adultery and abandonment. Sandra was ordered to pay back half the stolen funds, $7,100, within 6 months. She'd keep only her personal possessions. No alimony, no support from Brian. The judge also mentioned that the district attorney's office would likely pursue charges against both Sandra and Eric for conspiracy, though that was separate from the family court matter. Finally, Eric stood, face contorted. He lunged at Brian, sending a chair scraping. "You bastard, I'll break you!" But 2 bailiffs tackled him to the ground, handcuffing him. Sandra stood back, horror in her eyes. She tried to speak to Brian, but Amelia stepped between them, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare," Amelia hissed. "You lost the right to talk to him the second you plotted to kill him." Sandra's composure wavered. I never would have done it. I was confused." Brian spoke, voice low. "You left me rotting in a hospital, pregnant with another man's child, and took every cent I had. You made your choices, Sandra. Live with them." In the weeks that followed, the scandal spread. Eric lost his position at the law firm, was disbarred after an investigation revealed multiple ethical violations, and faced a civil lawsuit from Brian's side. Sandra kept her paralegal job, barely, due to her advanced pregnancy and a pity extension from the firm's senior partner. But rumors whispered that she might be cut loose after the baby. The baby itself, heartbreakingly, never made it. Sandra miscarried under the stress and learned she wouldn't be able to conceive again. Yet Brian's thirst for revenge had only grown. The recorded conversations confirmed Eric's talk of murder. Even if the DA didn't have enough to lock him up, Brian refused to let him get away scot-free. Dark thoughts plagued him at night. Sometimes he dreamt of sneaking up behind Eric with the Bowie knife, hearing his pleas, or setting up a little accident with the man's fancy Corvette. The old Brian would have hesitated, but the new, twisted version, the one shaped by war and betrayal, toyed with the idea. Mike McGregor and George Williams both cautioned him. "Let the law handle it," they said. But Brian's father, Bob, privately confided, "I don't blame you if you handle things your way. Just be careful." Amelia sensed the roiling hatred in Brian. She tried to soothe him. "Don't let this anger take you over," she whispered one evening, arms draped around his neck as he sat in a recliner. "You've been through war, betrayal, everything. Take solace in what we have here." Brian exhaled. "I'm trying." But a few days later, Eric got jumped outside a bar by masked men. He was beaten savagely, leaving him with lasting injuries, and a sign pinned to his jacket reading Semper Fi. When Brian heard the news, a cold satisfaction flickered in his eyes. He told Amelia, "I was here the entire night with you, wasn't I?" She looked at him, heart pounding, uncertain. Eric spent weeks recovering, flinching at shadows. His money drained from fighting lawsuits and paying hush money. He tried to appeal the disbarment, lost, and eventually got tangled in legal fees that swallowed most of his assets. Rumor had it he was living in a shabby motel. Then a few weeks later, he was found hanged in a storage unit. The cops ruled it a self-ending. Several insisted there was no sign of foul play. Others whispered that the angle of the rope looked suspicious. But the matter soon went cold. When the news reached Brian, he stood silent for a moment, then scoffed. Good riddance. He felt a strange emptiness, as if a chapter had ended but left no triumph, only more ghosts. Sandra's collapse was more prolonged. Shunned at work, riddled with guilt, she lived alone in a tiny apartment. She tried once to beg Brian's forgiveness, calling him at odd hours. He answered late one night, voice groggy. "Sandra?" A bitter laugh. "You still remember my name, I see." He tensed. "What do you want?" She was drunk, slurring. "I lost everything, Brian. The baby, my job prospects. Eric's gone. They tell me at the firm I might be let go soon. I just wanted to say sorry. His jaw tightened. A little late for that. You always were so dramatic, she sneered. Then the venom in her voice faded. I did love you once, Brian, didn't I? He said nothing, tears burning his eyes. Then Amelia walked into the room, wearing one of his old t-shirts, and pressed a hand to his shoulder. He hung up without a word. The phone rang again, but they ignored it. Shortly afterward, Sandra died in a sudden car accident. Police suspected she fell asleep at the wheel. Brian found himself numb at her funeral. He attended with Amelia and his parents out of a sense of final respect for the past. In the coffin, Sandra looked small, the arrogance gone from her pale features. Brian thought he might feel some sense of triumph, but all he felt was emptiness. Brian's life finally found stability. The lawsuits ended, granting him significant damages. Wilkins welcomed him back at the shop, doubled his pay, and later, in 1980, left Brian the entire business. Amelia kept her promise, becoming a permanent part of his life. A month after his divorce, he proposed. She accepted, eyes shining. Their wedding was a proud Marine affair, complete with a sword ceremony. Over time, his nightmares of Vietnam and Sandra faded. He stayed in the reserves, rising to Master Gunnery Sergeant before retiring in 1992. He and Amelia had 2 sons who grew up working in the shop, which flourished under Brian's leadership. Yet on quiet nights, ghosts lingered. Sitting on his porch with whiskey in hand, he stared at his Bowie knife, memories flashing. Da Nang, the alley beating, Sandra's betrayal, Eric's threats. He had won, but not without blood. Amelia would wrap her arms around him, whispering, "I love you. You're safe." Brian would nod, turning the knife in his hands. "Yeah," he'd murmur, "I am." By 2008, Brian and Amelia decided to retire from the shop, passing it on to their sons. Their life found a serene new normal. One day, as they were strolling past a tattoo parlor, Brian paused, eyeing a large sketch in the window, an intricate rose design. "Thinking about getting more ink?" Amelia teased. "You already have that death before dishonor on your chest." He gazed at her a moment, then stepped inside. She followed, confused. "What are you doing?" she asked. He removed his shirt, revealing scars, a battered ear, the old USMC ink. "I want your name over my heart," he said. "I want the world to know you're the woman who saved me from self-destruction, who gave me hope when everything else was betrayal." Tears welled in her eyes. "Brian, you don't have to." "Shh," he murmured. "I want this." The tattoo artist, a young woman covered in colorful ink, glanced at Brian's scars and paused. "You sure about the pain, Grandpa?" she joked. "That's a tender spot." He nodded firmly. "Pain's nothing new." As the needle buzzed, Brian gritted his teeth, memories flashing. Gunfire in the jungle, Sandra's betrayal, Eric's threats, Amelia's quiet strength. He endured the sting, a reminder of how far he'd come, and how much he'd lost in his pursuit of revenge. He had survived war and heartbreak, only to be saved by a woman who saw his worth when he couldn't. An hour later, the artist wiped away the blood, revealing Amelia's name in bold script. Brian's eyes burned as he traced the ink. Amelia's own tears mirrored his. This was more than a tattoo. It was a vow, a love he never thought possible after Sandra. Leaving the shop, he felt the weight of his past, but also a quiet release. He had fought with fists, bullets, and vengeance. Now, at last, he could rest, with the woman who had shown him that even after the worst betrayals, love could still break through.